everyone, Mike Terrell here, founder of Fourscore Solutions, and today we're going to go through Data Shuttle, building it from scratch. Anyone who attended our Engage session, we kind of went through a particular use case regarding Smartsheet. Now we're going to go through a different use case, building Data Shuttle out from the beginning and using it in a real-world scenario. So for today's example, what we're looking at is an exceptional experience survey. This survey, for our example, is something that actually already exists for this particular client in Excel. So they use Microsoft Forms and they pull in data answering different survey questions. And in today's environment, they analyze those responses, which have a grading scale, 1 through 4. But in addition to that, they also have brief explanations that come through as well. So as we see here, we have a list of 14 different questions that get asked on this survey. And those survey results come in via this Excel file. So each response comes through as a row. So ID 1 would be response 1 from an anonymous user. And we can see the responses to those questions. Now each question follows 4 categories: approach, deployment, learning and development, and integration, and really grades the performance level 1 through 4 on that success. And there might be a brief explanation as to why you gave those scores for that particular question. But as you can see, in a process like this, you have multiple columns with similar names: approach, approach 2, deployment 2, approach 4, deployment 4, and so on for all the different questions that get asked. So one of the challenges with a solution like this in Excel is that you have to have basically a second tab that lists out your questions and some custom formulas where you can actually do the count from the other form to get a sense of what the totals would be. Maybe you'd like to sum those values, maybe you want to do a weighted average, and then ultimately you want to blend those scores together at the very end and maybe produce some charting or reporting based on this information. All this can be done in Excel, but if it's a repeatable process when new submissions are coming in, if your Excel is set up as a template, great, the system works just fine. But what if it can be automated? What if it's something that you don't really need to go through all the Excel counts and formulas? You just use a system to pull data in, analyze it, and give you the outputs right away. Well, that's where Smartsheet comes in, and specifically Data Shuttle. So right at the top here, we're looking at this experience. Maybe this experience could just be done in Smartsheet only. Who knows? We'll take a look at that later. But let's say we want to pull information in directly from Microsoft. So we have our Microsoft Forms, and we're going to leverage Data Shuttle to pull all of our data in. So in this example, the first thing we need to do is actually set up Data Shuttle for this process to work. So let's start at the beginning. The beginning is our Excel file. We have our raw data coming in for all of our survey responses. Well, the first thing we'll want to do is actually set up a sheet where we can collect those responses. So here we have a very basic sample sheet where we can collect individual responses and pull in data that would map to approach, deployment, learning and development, and integration, plus the question responses. Now again, I've pre-filled this data already with those responses, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to remove this data because we're starting from scratch. So we'll delete this data out, and now we have a blank sheet. And really what this does is allows A to B mapping to take place where we can map columns together. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my Data Shuttle application and create a brand new workflow. We're going to be uploading data, and we're going to pick a Smartsheet attachment. So we want to upload this data somewhere, and so we want to find a sheet where this attachment can exist. So we're going to go through, and we're going to go to our training example, we're going to go to Data Shuttle, and we're going to go to our EES form sheet. Now, this sheet is really just going to act as a collection hub. In Data Shuttle, you can use a Smartsheet attachment, or you can use a cloud service like OneDrive, SharePoint, Google Drive, or Box to pull the file. For simplicity's sake, we're going to use a Smartsheet attachment to pull files in. Now you could do this in the same sheet that you're doing your mapping to, but we're going to use the form instead. A separate sheet that's going to act as a form to collect it. So I have a few fields here already to collect the form, but we're going to upload a new version here. So since I already have this built on our dashboard, we can go ahead and just upload. So we're going to select our sample data. So we've dragged and dropped this data over. Again, you might see an error on this chart that appeared. Again, that's totally fine. We removed the data from the underlying sheet, so of course the chart would break. But once we add new data in, this chart will come back. So we've pulled in our Excel data, and we're going to submit this information into the system. Now that we've captured the response, we can go back to our form sheet. And as we do a quick refresh here, we'll see a new row appear with our sample data. So we see our new submission that has come in. We see our EES sample data has been pulled in correctly. So we can go to Data Shuttle and we can say Smartsheet attachment, and we can say give me the most recent file that has been pulled in. And so we'll click next, and then we'll select the target sheet where we want this to go. Now it can go to a sheet or it can go to data table. If you're interested in learning more on data table, feel free to subscribe. We'll be doing a video on data table later this year. So we're going to select a sheet, and same thing. We're going to go back to our training file, Data Shuttle, pull over our Data Shuttle example, and go to our EES sheet up above. We're going to merge data between the two, and then we're also going to update rows. So if there's ever any changes or someone goes back and updates their survey responses, we want those changes to come back through, even if it's already been uploaded. Again, we can also replace all rows in the target sheet and just pull in new data each time. More often than not, we'll see merge. If we wanted to do dynamic dropdowns, so kind of a different process, we could leverage Data Shuttle for that. Although my personal recommendation is to leverage Bridge if you're looking for dynamic dropdown options. Seems to be a little more stable. But overall, every time we're going to merge data, we can say, do we want to add new rows to the sheet, update existing rows, and we can also delete rows that no longer match the filter criteria that we might be setting up. So again, if we wanted to set some filter criteria, we could do so. We could do that based on columns, equaling something, greater than, contains, maybe something that's blank. Again, we haven't defined columns yet, so we're not going to leverage filters. But again, if we wanted to, it's a pretty simple logic setup that we can do based on the column names. So first and foremost, we're going to set up a unique identifier to map our data points together. In this case, it is the ID column. So if we just do a quick peek back to our Excel data, we can see all the way left, our column A is labeled ID. And then if we do a quick peek in our sheet that we're doing the mapping, we have an ID column as well. So we'll leverage this to be our unique identifier between the two sides. And we'll dive back. Okay, took a brief pause. For whatever reason, small bug, but the EES sample data just wasn't picking up. So all I did, for those who are curious between the pause, is I literally just went back to the source. So that source error message we were seeing just came back here, switched it to name, switched it back to most recent, and then it cleared right up and found our most recent file. So this file does have column headers in, so we can let it know, hey, first row and tab number will have column headers. Again, you can specify the row and tab number, so it knows that we're looking at the first tab and first row of data will be our header set. So as we move right along, we can go back to filters. So again, for filters, now we'll see all our columns showing up from our Excel file where we can then do our filters. Again, in this example, we're not going to leverage any filters. But now we can go and say our unique identifier is our ID column, and then based on the column name, it's automatically mapping those fields together. But if we look, I have a sheet column called question 1, latest responses, that we can see in my sheet. But if we look at the Excel data, our Excel data doesn't have that. It has this column J here for please briefly explain why you gave the rating above. So what we can do in Data Shuttle is we can go find that column and select that as our mapping. Again, for column type, auto will kind of do the match between the two, but if we know something's for sure a text or for sure a number, and you want to be sure, again, text, it's pretty straightforward. If it's auto, it'll map it to text. But if you know something is a number and should be text, you can always change that, or vice versa. If you know something is a number, but you might be worried that Smartsheet will modify it as text. So we have our column mappings listed. And we can say we want to run this data shuttle on an attachment. And we can also do it on a schedule as well. So if we wanted to say Monday, Tuesday, again, it's going to be universal time. So do the conversion for your local area. But let's just say 7 a.m. is when I want it to run. And we can say start at 7 and every hour run the workflow to see if there's new data. And maybe we're just going to run it 7 to 4 p.m. And you can create multiple schedules too. So if you need to do it specific schedules for specific days of the week, you have the option to do so. Again, for our example, we'll just run it on attachment. Again, you can also manually run this workflow whenever you need to. Again, any input expressions, so if you're leveraging some Smartsheet functions, again, there's a helper link here. We're not going to cover that in this video. If you are interested in input expressions, though, feel free to reach out. Sharing settings, again, we want to make sure that permissions are required between the two, and it is going to be the workflow manager. So you want to make sure whoever's setting up Data Shuttle is that they at least have read permissions on your source and write permissions on your target. And you can enter multiple different managers. And so we'll give this a quick workflow name. And we'll go ahead and save the workflow. And you see, just like that, it is connected. So it will run on an attachment. Again, for the first run, I always recommend running it right after you build it. So we can see that the run is in progress. Again, if we ever need to edit the workflow, we can see the edit here, make a copy, update the share settings, and we can also see the activity log as well. So we can see here's when the workflow was created. And again, once we have runs that have finished, we can see those finished activities as well. So right here, we can see the workflow has run right away. So that is essentially saying that the data we pulled from our EES sample data, once this was submitted, will then show up in our EES sheet. So the workflow's run, and as you can see, it's populating right here, right in front of us. Now, a couple things with the sheet that we're doing, which is one of the challenges and struggles of trying to calculate this data in Excel. People, when they're selecting their ratings, they're selecting level 1, level 3, level 2, and unfortunately what that does is that gives you a very clear descriptor of what the data is, but if you want to analyze it, what you're really looking at are 0, 1, 2, and 3 for our 4-level system. So if you really want to see those numbers, well, now you have to calculate out those details. And so what we're looking to do within Smartsheet is we can really simplify that. We can say if these fields relate to our question 1, we could have helper columns. That is essentially just a formula that's looking at the value to the right and pulling the first digit over based on the value. So 2122 reflects our level 2, level 1, and then level 2 that we're seeing in our next two options. Our latest responses are coming in as well. And so as we go back to our dashboard, we'll do a refresh here because we already have this sheet set up in a way that our data from our sheet is connected to a metric sheet, which we'll go through in a little bit, but it's also connected to a report that we can then use to analyze. So as you can see here, we're only looking at one question on this form, but our question 1 results are pulling over right away. And then our report is pulling through those responses as well. So we can analyze, we can pull a quick average using group and summary, and we can also see the details of our different levels. Now again, we're pulling all this information from Microsoft over to Data Shuttle, or leveraging Data Shuttle, but this can be done in Smartsheet directly. So if you are using a form in an external process, or you have data from an external process, Data Shuttle is a great way to pull it over. But you can also consider just migrating that process over to Smartsheet as well. So on the Smartsheet side, if you were to do this directly, you could really just build the form from scratch. You get your questions, you get your levels. Again, we're just doing the numbers directly here. But you could obviously put level 1, level 2, and have those numbers convert on the back end. And as you submit that data into Smartsheet, that data would go through a back-end sheet. And so we'll do a quick refresh here to pull the latest row over. All right, we see our latest row, 16, our 2132. That information's pulling over. And then as we go back to our sheet here, we can see we have a couple test comments down here. So let's do one quick thing since we have 3 of them in here. We'll call this test 1, 2, 3. And we'll save that one over here and refresh our dashboard. And we'll see test 1 through 1, 2, 3, our latest response showing up at the top, and those numbers affecting our averages up above. So again, the Smartsheet way, very simple. You're just filling out a form, data's going into the sheet, it's giving you your analytics. But again, sometimes you might not have those processes within Smartsheet. So if you have something that is external, you can absolutely use a system where you're pulling Excel data over. That's going to a sheet. You're doing your calculations via helper columns. The nice thing about these is these are column formulas, so as new information comes in, those calculations are getting updated in real time. So one thing I want to do is look at row 7 here, where we're seeing zeros across the board. And we see a nice little taco and burrito comment over here. Well, what if someone goes and updates their information? Now maybe it's not a survey, that might not be realistic, but maybe we're looking at sales data. Or maybe you're looking at something related to finance or marketing regarding a campaign, and you're pulling in recent numbers on how a particular campaign is doing. And that information happens outside of Smartsheet. What happens when the data changes? And that is really one of the true benefits of Smartsheet. So we're looking at our sample data here, and we're looking at row 7, and we're just going to take our information up above here, and we're going to just change it around. We're going to say we got 2, 3, let's do another 2, and integration, let's give that one a 3 too. And let's just change our comments around and say I love Data Shuttle, but we'll actually spell love correctly. How's that sound? So again, we're doing this just on our first question for our survey. Again, there's a bunch of other data here, but the point remains the same, is that as you have existing data that updates, we can pull this information in and have it reflect the existing data and update it with the latest and greatest. So we've saved this Excel file, and we're going to go back to our dashboard here, and we're going to drop in that latest file that we have. So we have our EES sample data. We're going to go ahead and hit submit, and we've captured that response, and we'll go to our form. So this form sheet is kind of our collection. We can see Smartsheet wants us to refresh for changes. So we'll do a quick refresh. We see our new submission that has come in. We see our EES sample data is pulled over. Now our sheet will get updated with the latest information, but while it's running, we'll just go to Data Shuttle, and we'll do a quick refresh here. and Data Shuttle will start to trigger and run. So we're going to let it run on the attachment, and then we're going to let Data Shuttle pull this information over. Now what will be happening behind the scenes is that because we set up that unique identifier, we're going to look at ID 7, and it's going to find that mapping, and because we have that tag saying update data anytime there's a new data set that comes in, so this most recent attachment will hit, Data Shuttle will run. All of these other options 1 through 13 will stay the same with the exception of 7, where as we can see, it is updated in real time. 7's matched, all our numbers are coming over from Data Shuttle. These would be the values that we changed, and then our calculations are updating automatically. As we go back to the dashboard, we'll do a quick save here. And again, you don't need to do a save. Only reason I did the save is because we highlighted these rows. So don't think you have to open the sheet and save. You don't. That was just because I did the highlight. If we go back to the dashboard, we will do a refresh. And what we will see is we'll see our latest response come in, or our updated response for that ID 7 data. And then our chart metrics will have been updated as well. And as we can see here, I Love Data Shuttle comes in. And overall, how these metrics are pulled together, again, some of these are just reports pulling directly, but we do have a metric sheet as well. So we have question 1 with our different options, and then we are leveraging cross-sheet reference formulas to pull our data over. So you can do the calculation for how many submissions you have. As you can see, this is updating too, as more data comes in through other data submissions that may be happening in the background. We can see what our numbers are for our levels, calculate the percentages, and then build our charting off of this. And you can just expand it. If you have multiple questions, you can add different sections with different calculations, pulling in different data points. Again, these top sections up above are going to be the Smartsheet Direct versions, and our version down here is the Data Shuttle version, where we're connected to that live data that comes in from external sources. So I hope this was helpful. I hope we can really see, the power of Data Shuttle, how we can use it not only in a small use case for surveying, but how it can be used to pull in other data as well. If there are any questions or comments, feel free to give us a like and subscribe on the video. We'll be putting out a lot more content in the coming year. But really hope this was helpful. Appreciate you taking the time to watch it, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks, everyone.